Welcome back to the Sports Complex on a Friday afternoon. On the show today, as we get ready for the weekend, we talk about the big games in the Big 12 and Texas taking on the number 3 team on the country on the road. Big game for Texas tomorrow. Some of the other Big 12 matchups. It's also All-Star Weekend happening in Indianapolis for the NBA. Some Spurs players, some Rockets players, some Mavericks players, all taking part in the event. We'll get into all the festivities happening at All-Star Weekend. Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the day. Texas baseball kicks off their season as well tonight against San Diego. We'll mention that, go into that, and a little bit more Cowboys talk as they hire some staff, and we may look at some of their free agents to be who the Cowboys have to make some tough decisions about. We know Jerry likes his guys. Will he keep them, or do some of them have time to move on? We'll get to all that and a lot more, including your text messages. 512-447-3776. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. You guys drive the show. I just try to keep it on the rails, which means whatever you guys want to talk about. If you guys got a take, if you guys got something you want to talk about, we'll try and talk about it on the show at some point. We try to get to everybody's text, talk a little bit about everything that you want to talk about. We don't have everything in front of us, so we can't talk about everything, but we try to talk about as much as we can with you guys on the show. If you have hot takes, we do the Big Fat Poll of the day at the end of the first segment, so we'll get to that shortly and give you something to chime in about. We love when you guys join the show. It makes the show a lot more fun for me, and I think for everybody listening too, when you join the show. 512-447-3776, especially on a Friday afternoon. We get to the weekend. Gonna have a good weekend. A buddy of mine just got a new place, so go check that place out this weekend. Have some fun. A big UFC fight this weekend, a card where I actually know a lot more of the fighters. This seems to be a big one this weekend. Maybe go check out the UFC fight this weekend. That could be a lot of fun. Some good matchups. NBA All-Star Weekend. I am a NBA head, so I do enjoy NBA All-Star Weekend. And, the Spurs at least have some people involved in some of the events, so I can have some people to root for in those events too. We'll get into all of that in just a little bit. And, of course, big game for Texas basketball, taking on number 3 Houston at Houston. Texas, of course, dropped the game to Houston in Austin. It was a close matchup, but it was a matchup that Texas was in and felt like they could have won if they would have picked up the intensity earlier in the first half. It took them about 10 minutes to really get a feel for what the game was going to be. And then coming out in the second half, played a much better game, but just started off really slow, did not play with the effort and intensity they needed to play with against Houston. And you hope as they get to this back end of the Big 12 conference, and there's a few games they're going to play against teams they've not played against, Kansas being the most notable of those. But most of the teams that they're playing at the end of the season, they have played before already, and it gives you a little bit better of an idea of what you're walking into. Because you can watch game film against somebody else and take away what you think, everything is happening. You can take away what you feel like the players is going to be and the intensity of the game. And once you get into the game, both teams are going to try and set their energy level and intensity. Both teams are going to try and work the referees to where they can get the game called the way they want it to. That Houston game also was a game that was called like 2 different halves very much. And so if you can work it to where you get the calls your way. But I think this Texas team needs to walk into Houston understanding that unlike how they've played a lot of their careers, unlike how they've kind of tried to start off this season, that they are the underdogs, that this is a matchup not many people are giving them a shot in, and they have to come in with that mentality of we want to go pull the upset and not necessarily the mentality early in the season of we're everybody's rival, which you still always have to have, and not have that mentality of we can come in, we're Texas. But have the mentality of this is Houston. Houston basketball has been real good. It's one of the reasons that Houston gets into the Big 12. It wasn't for their football. It wasn't for anything other than that men's basketball team. So you have to go in there and try and pull off a big upset in the Big 12 that will really bump you up a lot more into securing your space in the NCAA tournament. We've talked yesterday about the 7 games left and how we thought they could end up with the season for Texas. This is a big game that if you win this one, it makes everything else just that little bit easier because you don't necessarily have that that cloud hanging over you, that shadow hanging over you of, well, if you lose this one, it becomes harder to get in, and now you're on that bubble, and now you're on bubble watch. And as much as you try to pretend that you're not watching what that is, and you're trying to pretend that you don't necessarily, that it doesn't bother you what they say, it does, and you're going to see it. And, they're college kids. They're going to class and having people ask them questions. All those things happen. So now you're playing a Houston team that you're going to need to show up to and show up with a lot of intensity. This is another big game for Dillon Mitchell. Dillon Mitchell, who came back to school to try and, up his draft stock to show he could play with a lot of bigger, play with the big boys. And there's a game where his athleticism, his size is a severe advantage over a Houston team that doesn't necessarily have that. But can he play with the physicality and the energy that Houston plays? Can he play a 35-minute game without getting in foul trouble but making a huge impact? Can he box out? Can he go up and get rebounds using his athleticism and not allowing the ball to bounce out and go to other guys who are going to be boxing out? Can he get around guys and be looking for rebounds before the ball goes up, understanding where to be on the court, understanding not to put yourself in bad situations? Those are all things. On the offensive end, can he stay in attack mode and not be complacent that he knows he can't hit a three, so he just kind of sits around there and not necessarily looking for the ball, looking to get cuts, looking to get lob passes, looking to get the ball? Can Dillon Mitchell take that step forward against this Houston team and show the people that he can compete against the number 3 team in the country that is going to beat him around? And when people look at him and say he's a little bit skinnier than they may like for a guy that does a lot of things he does, he can show that he can play with those guys and will continue to put weight on his frame. That's a big question for him this weekend. You want to see if Max Abmas can get open when they try to ball deny Max Abmas. They're going to play that 3-guard lineup again that Houston likes to play. And if they can play with that 3-guard lineup and kind of keep him out and make Tyrese Hunter make a lot more decisions, that's where Tyrese Hunter starts to get in trouble because he gets a little caught up. He's used to playing with Max Abmas now, playing 35 minutes, playing in practice with Max Abmas. Can he flip the switch and be ready to go into, okay, I need to play without Max Abmas, so they have to not ball deny him. We have to be able to score without him. You have Kendall Weaver, who's not going to be the big offensive option. His defense will help. He wasn't a starter when they played last time. I.T. Horton played 20 minutes in that game. His numbers will probably go down in this one. They've gone down since Kendall Weaver's gotten in the lineup. So can you see the numbers step up where Tyrese Hunter can take over offensively and at least move the ball around, get some things going, drive the paint, cause Houston to collapse in, and then get the ball to a Dylan Disu or an attacking Dillon Mitchell? Can you do that? Can you make them have to stop ball denying Max Abmas? And if they're not ball denying Max Abmas, can he get open and get shots, which he needs to make early on in this game? That offensively, we can also throw in the last Texas-Houston matchup, Dylan Disu only gets 14 points in that game, 6 rebounds. A lot of that was he got in foul trouble early. They knew how to go after him. He played a decent amount of minutes, but a lot of those was where he couldn't really bump around and do what he wanted to do inside. The physicality early on in that game really set Dylan Disu off. If he can get going where he's playing much better now than he was playing then, that 3-point shot, if he continues to stroke that 3-point shot and makes Houston come out on him to open up the lane for a Dillon Mitchell, for a Max Abmas, for a Tyrese Hunter, and for himself to make those kinds of plays, that'll be huge if they can hit those threes. They went 6 for 20 in threes when they played in Austin, which isn't terrible, but it's not where you want to be. You want to be closer to 10 for 20, at least 8 or 9 for 20. And if you're going to be shooting at that, you have to be able to take those things. You have to be able to play in the paint, not allow those offensive rebounds. That's just the intensity and integrity. Like, balls can't bounce on rebounds. And it's something that's silly that I get mad at Max Abmas for, but it's any coach will get mad at you. If you are standing and a ball bounces near you for a rebound and it's contested and you don't get it, then you aren't going for the ball. You have to go for those rebounds. Texas has to go for every defensive rebound like that. Especially you're not a fast break team right now. You're playing in the half court a lot, so I don't know why you're trying to rush back down the court necessarily. You have to go for those rebounds. And I think the addition of Kendall Weaver should be a good piece that when you're looking at what this team did to Texas last game, that really Jamal Sheed was the only guy who's gone off. LJ Cryer has not been the offensive weapon this season that he was at Baylor. They just haven't had the offensive weapon from their other guards. Now, they can. You have to play good defense, but I think Max Abmas and Tyrese Hunter can take that. If Kendall Weaver can stay on Jamal Shead, who had 25 points, but he took 24 shots in that game and went 11 for 24. If you can knock him down and make him a bulk shooter, but you're constantly in his face, Kendall Weaver could be a big difference for Texas in this game against Houston. If you were able to keep him and his shooting under wraps, keep him where he never gets going, especially in that second half when he likes to hit some clutch shots, you can slow that down. Another big chance for Texas to take a shot there. A lot of things got to go right for Texas. We all know that. You know you're the underdog going in. You know you're not likely to win the game. So a lot of things have to go right for Texas to win this. If Houston starts shooting 40, 50% and they're just hitting everything, if LJ Cryer starts going off, then it's going to be a really hard road for Texas to climb. If Texas is getting open shots and not hitting them, it's going to be a long road. Even if you're getting rebounds, you have to be able to shoot 45%, 45% on, and 50, 60% on open shots. You're going to miss some across the paint because they're going to beat up on you. They're going to go inside. You have to be able to hit those threes against a team like Houston to make them step out of the paint a little bit more, because the difference of getting that foul called when a defender, when you cut to the paint and when you're going in to get in foul trouble, and a guy who's already there because they're not respecting everybody's threes and not respecting the outside shot, versus when they have to and you get the rotation and everybody's running and now they're coming back in, you get to the free throw line a lot more. Free throw line against a team like Houston is great because every shot you're going to be taking is going to be a battle. And so if you get some free ones and you get a little break to go hit those shots, those are all big possessions for Texas. This isn't one that I would say I'm predicting Texas to win because so many things have to go right. And from what we've seen with this team so far this season, it doesn't feel like they're going to come out with the urgency and intensity like they need to. It just doesn't feel like they're going to be able to come out with, even if they shoot well to start, which they've done this season, it wasn't necessarily, well, they got 4 offensive rebounds in that first 8 minutes. It wasn't, well, they really shut them down defensively in the first 8 minutes. It's more they hit shots and the other team didn't, and that'll flip in a heartbeat in any basketball game. So I'm not saying I think that Texas is going to win this game. I think there's a path for them to win for sure. They have the ability. Dillon Mitchell is such a big piece because they have athleticism on the team, but not size and athleticism is what Dillon Mitchell has. And the ability to go up and get rebounds. Those guys box out really well. They use physicality a lot more, and he likes to use finesse and athleticism and height. He needs to use that to get those rebounds. Dylan Disu staying out of foul trouble, not getting baited in to a guy who's 6'8", bumping with you all game long. Juwan Roberts last game had 8 rebounds and 14 points. A guy like that who just kind of veteranly goes after a Dylan Disu and gets him into foul trouble, gets him where he can't play his game defensively. Those are the big problems that Texas faces in this matchup. Hopefully they'll be able to figure that out. Hopefully they'll be able to make that matchup. My money's not on it. 11 a.m. games are tough, too, to get really hyped up and that energetic on the road. To get that energetic, it's a hard thing to do. But this is a game for RT, for Texas. They need to get at whatever you have to do to get really pumped up and energetic. You cannot come out with the attitude of we're Texas. You have to come out with the attitude of we're about to beat somebody up. We're about to get into a fight. That's the attitude you have to have. If you want to walk around with your horns up, they're just going to bounce. They're just going to hit them. They don't. That's what Houston does. They play physical basketball, and they do it well. They know how to do it with their bodies. They know how to do it with great footwork and not fouls. It's just physical, non-fouling basketball. And if you don't believe that they can do it, then you're in for a long ride for Texas. But those are some of the things they can do. Dylan Disu will have to step up in a big way. And depending on if they deny the ball to Max Abmas, Tyrese Hunter is going to have to step up. And where he hasn't been great on the road this season, he had a really good game against West Virginia. They've had the week off. They're rested. Hopefully they can come out and hit some threes, because hitting threes will open up a lot of things for this Texas team. If they don't, it's going to be just, like we said, there's so many things that if they're not able to do those little pieces, everything becomes that much harder, and you're really relying on Houston not having a good game. Elsewhere in the Big 12, we get a Texas Tech and Iowa State matchup. Iowa State has been playing great. They're number 10 in the country right now. Texas Tech is coming off that win against Kansas, so they're feeling pretty good about what they just did to a really good team at Kansas. However, this is on the road. We know in the Big 12, the road is hard. Iowa State's been defending that home court. Texas Tech hasn't been quite the same team on the road offensively, which has been their strength at home. They're going to have to play physicality against Iowa State and find ways to get to the free throw line and slow this game down, take the crowd out of it if Texas Tech wants to have a shot against Iowa State. They just have too many clutch players down at the end of games where if you can take the crowd out of it and push them back and just get some free throws, Texas Tech has a shot, but they're going to have to play a different style of basketball and try to push the agenda against Iowa State. Also, we get a TCU at Kansas State. Interesting to see. TCU has won has gone 4-2 in their last 6 games. They're looking to turn it up here at the end of the season, playing a little bit better. A team you probably don't want to meet in the Big 12 tournament. Could be a matchup for Texas early. TCU. K-State not looking like that. They're kind of fading the other way. They just haven't been able to get their offense going. That could be another road win for TCU, but Big 12, road is hard. The home court advantage is real in the Big 12, so we'll see what Kansas State can pull out there. You also get Cincinnati at UCF, 2 new schools. Should be a fun game to watch. Cincinnati wins the game against UCF, but they win the points in the paint in the last battle, 36-20. They go inside hard against UCF. Well, I don't know if they can recreate quite that same matchup this time around, but we will see if Cincinnati can go at them again. I think there's a UCF who's been playing better, closing out games a little bit better, but if Victor Locken can have a good game, and these big men for Cincinnati, they can compete with most teams. They're just having trouble keeping them out of foul trouble and keeping them on the court when teams like UCF start to run against them. And at home, that feels like what they're going to do. And finally, another big matchup, number 6 Kansas at number 25 Oklahoma. Kevin McCullough Jr. is expected to return in that game. Oklahoma is likely without Soares and Hughley, so it could be a difficult road for Oklahoma. You have to use that home court to try and get your offense going. But again, you have to play physical against Kansas. They're a team that doesn't necessarily like to get pushed around a lot. They're a team that doesn't like to get bumped and play harder. They're a team with a lot more finesse and talent where they don't feel that playing, Big 12 style of basketball always favors them. We saw Bill Self actually got ejected for the first time in his career against Texas Tech because Texas Tech was playing rough and fair. I don't know if you could complain about the calls or whatever else you want to put in that game, but he gets ejected because Texas Tech just goes at people, and that's what happens in Lubbock. You get rubbed that way. So OU's got to play physical to have a shot against Kansas, or Kansas could pick up a big road win to help them get closer to that 2 seed. I don't know if they're going to be a 1 seed, but get closer to getting that 2 seed. And if they do well in the Big 12 tournament, who knows, could jump up into that 1 seed. You think Houston right now is a good runner-up now in the Big 12, a team where Houston could have been around there for years before, but now playing the Big 12 schedule and still playing at that level feels like they could be a 1 seed as well. So a big game for Texas this weekend, big games in the Big 12. It's also NBA All-Star Weekend happening. We get tonight, we will get the All-Star Celebrity Game. A couple of football players in this. The funniest one was that apparently Stephen A. Smith was trying to play around on the court, and the rumor was Micah Parsons crossed him up and broke it or hurt his ankle and made him go to the hospital. So it wasn't on whatever show he's on this morning. But you will get to see C.J. Stroud versus Micah Parsons, Texans versus Cowboys, and the event will be a lot of fun. Mecole Hardman coming off that big touchdown. Who knows if he slept, if he's still drunk. He's supposed to be playing. Puka Nacua is going to be in the game as well. So a lot of celebrities. It is fun. It's just whatever it is, but it'll be fun to see C.J. Stroud, who we knew was a baller back in the day, still shoots hoops before football games. See C.J. Stroud in there. Micah Parsons hopefully doesn't hurt anybody else. I'm a little worried about him coming at somebody full force. I've played basketball with football players before, and it can be painful when you're shooting threes and you put the ball up and you just see him coming right at you with that shoulder down. And you're like, I don't think they're trying to block the shot. That'll be an interesting one. Also tonight, we have the Rising Stars. The way they do the Rising Stars now is there's 4 teams, basically 3 of NBA players and 1 with a lot of G League Ignite. Ron Holland, the guy who was supposed to go to Texas but did not, was supposed to be playing. He is injured currently, so he won't be a part of it. But there are some Texas team players in it. From the Spurs, Victor Wembanyama and Jeremy Sohan are both in the Rising Stars. And Jabari Smith from the Rockets, Derek Lively from the Mavs are all taking part of the Rising Stars Challenge. The way they're doing it this year is at 4 teams. 2 teams will play first to 40. of the 4 teams that there's first two matchups. First team to 40 in both those matchups. The winner of those 2 games will go on to play a first to 25 game to win the Rising Stars Challenge and the Rising Stars games for rookies and sophomores. But some of the young guys for Texas that you can find in there are from Texas teams in Wimby and so on. And they're on 2 teams. So there's only 2 teams you have to keep up with. You're rooting for Texas people and you're watching night. Games are at 8 tonight, I believe. Team Pau Gasol is leading the team. With Victor Wembanyama and Jabari Smith Jr. Are on Team Pau, and Team Jalen with Jalen Rose is Jeremy Sohan and Derek Ladley. Jeremy Sohan is the replacement for Shaden Sharp, who was injured and not able to play, so Jeremy Sohan gets in as a replacement player. Then on Saturday, we get the Kia Skills Challenge. We get Team Pacers because all this is happening in Indianapolis at the Lucas Oil Field. So they will be having, but that's Tyrese Halliburton, Benedict Mathurin, and Miles Turner, former Longhorn Miles Turner. Then you get the All-Stars team with Scotty Barnes and Tyrese Maxey and Trae Young. That should be a good, decent team. And then the top picks with Paolo Banchero, Anthony Edwards, and Victor Wembanyama should be a fun team there with some big size on that one. That's where they got to do the obstacle course and, hit the couple shots in that one. They all do that. They had the passing drills where you have to hit the guy, you get different points for passing, kind of like the skills competition in football, and then a shootout with different numbers where you get different number of points for what shots you hit, all of those things. And this is also in the Saturday night event where they're going to have the court with the LED lights in it now. So you're actually going to have lights coming up. I have no idea how it's going to look. It could be ugly. Knowing how the in-season tournament looked this year, I don't have a lot of high hopes, but it'll be interesting to see nonetheless. We also get the three-point contest. Damian Lillard is defending his three-point crown against Tyrese Halliburton, going to be the home court guy again for that matchup, which should be a fun one. You also have Malik Beasley, Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Halliburton, Lauri Markkanen, Donovan Mitchell, Karl Anthony Towns, and Trae Young, all a part of the three-point contest. And then we have our slam dunk contest. Jaylen Brown, hats off to you, Jaylen Brown. Hats off to Jaylen Brown, a star player on a max contract who is going to be in the slam dunk contest. Hats off to him. We've been getting a lot of lower name players for a lot of years now. Hats off to Jaylen Brown. He will be part of that contest. Mac McClung, kid from Texas Tech who has been in and out of the league. He's a G League player right now, but he won the slam dunk contest last year. He's coming back. Says he has 3 dunks that we've never seen before and should look good in slow motion, is what he has said. So that should be fun to watch on Saturday. And with the lights and stuff, who knows what they can get to program in. Jamie Jaquez, the player from the Miami Heat, came from UCLA. That'll be another fun one in there. And Jacob Toppin from the Knicks closing out the NBA slam dunk players. Slam dunk contest. Look, I still like the slam dunk contest. I still like it. And then finally on Sunday, we get the All-Star game. We can talk more about that in a little bit. But I'm thrilled that it's back to East and West. The whole picking the teams thing made it feel like it wasn't, like you didn't care as much. Like there was no one to really root for in that. You may even root for your players, but I like the East and West. I'm for it. I'm going on the hot take. I'm for the East versus West. I know they've talked about doing the World versus USA, but I think they realize that might go over bad if the USA keeps losing. So they're like, let's go back to East and West. And they don't have to pick the teams beforehand. I would never. It was always awkward when they were trying to pick teams. Never was a big fan of that. So they will have that. We'll go over those lineups and everything in a little bit. But I do, because we were just talking about the slam dunk contest. Let's get to the big fat poll of the day.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the Day on the Horn.
Big fat poll of the day today, 512-447-3776. Because it is NBA All-Star Weekend, I want to ask you a simple question. Who is the greatest dunker of all time? That's slam dunk contest. That's in-game dunks. It's the dunks you see. Who is the greatest dunker of all time? Who's your pick? There's plenty of great ones to go from. You can even say Mac McClung is now the greatest dunker, and it's just because that's what he does better than anything else. Who's the greatest dunker of all time? Let us know on the text line, 512-447-3776. Let us know who is the greatest dunker of all time. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We come back. We will get into a little hook 'em up replay, talking some Texans. Rob Babers went for that. We talked some Texans yesterday. We're going to talk some Cowboys today, but we had Rod talking some Texas Nuggets as well. So we'll get into that when we come back here on the Sports Complex and the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex on a 512 Friday where we play local music. You can go check out Around Town this weekend. This is Amplified Heat. They are playing tonight at Valhalla. So if you want to head on downtown to Valhalla, you can check out Amplified Heat tonight. You're on a 512 Friday. Going to keep the show rolling right along. We're going to get to the text line in just a few minutes. 512-447-3776. If you got any takes on All-Star Weekend, anything you're looking forward to an All-Star Weekend, it is funny. It's in Indianapolis, so I know some of the NBA players not as thrilled. A lot of the media is enjoying, though, that there's a little bit of easy transportation, and it's a pretty well set up city for those kind of things. But if you want to go out and hit the parties, probably not as much fun. But we want to get to a Hook 'em Up replay here. If you don't, so send in those texts. We'll get to those in just a minute. Want to play a Hook 'em Up replay, talking about some Texans news. We hit some of the Texans talk yesterday, and Rod was hitting it this morning on the show. So why don't we play a little Hook 'em Up replay here on the Sports Complex?
All right, I know we talk a lot of Cowboys on the show, and we'll actually get back to a little Cowboys conversation, but I want to address the Texans here. Give the Texans fans out there a little bit of love, because there is a couple of items that I think are worthy of Texans fans being updated. Okay, so, and I got a suggestion actually for the Texans too that I want to get into that I think would be really interesting. You brought up earlier, Derrick Henry reportedly, at least based on some of the Vegas odds about where he's going to land, that one of the favorites is Baltimore. For where he'll land. I read an article on the 33rd Team. It's a really good website. They basically are devoted to NFL coverage. And Marcus Mosher, who writes a lot of stuff for them and actually writes about the Dallas Cowboys too, he was writing an article about the top 5 fits for free agent running back Derrick Henry. And one of his top 5 fits, them Houston Texans.
Nice.
He brings up the Texans. He said this isn't a perfect fit for many reasons, including Houston Texans' style of offense. They use a lot of shotgun and empty back sets on their later downs, and their run game is predicated on wide zone runs. But there are a lot of reasons why this could work. First of all, no team in the NFL knows Henry better than the Texans. In 14 career games against Houston, Henry ran for over 1,400 yards and 12 touchdowns. Yes, I remember it well. So familiarity, he says, often is a really good selling point. It's a good point. So he, at least, I think the point of the article, I don't think Derrick Henry's going to end up with the Texans, but you have been pointing out for a while, do you think the Texans are going to target a running back in free agency?
It depends on the price, right? I think the market is going to be, and again, they're in a position if you're going to overpay for running back, especially I'm a big Saquon Barkley fan for them, just because I think he can do similar to what Christian McCaffrey does for that offense.
That's a good point.
He's such a dynamic weapon in all phases. He's kind of like the Bijan Robinson argument we had. He's not just a running back. I mean, this guy is a bit of everything for you.
Yeah.
And to give C.J. Stroud that kind of weapon, but it's going to depend on market. But again, if you're going to do it, you do it while C.J. Stroud's in his second year, and you haven't had to pay him the mega bucks that you're going to have to.
Yeah.
So you have a couple. You could front load a contract, even overpay a little bit for Saquon Barkley over 2 years. Give him an option for a third where the price drops, and see if you can get at 26, 27. You get his, two really good years out of him, and maybe make a run.
Yeah, no, I like it. If you can get him, if you don't have to sign him to a long-term deal, and maybe he wants a long-term deal, but if you can get him, like you said, 1 to 2 years, maybe a third year as an option potentially. Yeah. That is the sweet spot because he's 26 years old right now. You just want to maximize him before he gets anywhere close to 30. Ideally, most running backs around 29 to 30, they start to depreciate in terms of their skill set. That'd be the perfect window. So I'm with you if you could do that. We know there will be a lot of other teams trying to get
poor
Saquon. And he was healthy last year. I think he's played 14 games last year and 16 before that, so relatively healthy too.
And he just has never been on a good team.
No.
I mean, poor guy. I mean, he's never has a good offensive line. There aren't any offensive weapons around him. The quarterback is Daniel Jones. It's like I think the NFL would like to see Saquon Barkley play on a team with talent.
Yeah.
I mean, and Houston's got talent. I mean, and a young quarterback that he's going to threaten you with the passing game.
O-line already built.
I think that'd be a cool fit. And then I think in the draft you could address receiver. Because I like the formation of Nico Collins, Tank Dell. Those are your first two, and then you could draft a young receiver that can come along. I like that. They also are going to have to replace Dalton Schultz at tight end if they don't re-sign Dalton Schultz because he was a key cog. He was a 1-year deal.
That's why a lot of people actually have mocked J.T. Sanders to the Texans in that second round. Though I've seen a lot of those, because it makes sense. With Dalton Schultz leaving.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because the Texans do have the quarterback on a rookie deal. They do have $70-some million in cap space, both to re-sign their own people and to go on under the market and get involved with a guy like Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, they do. And they're speaking of free agent odds. Bookies has a free agent odds list for Mike Evans, and they have the Texans with the best overall odds at plus 300 to acquire Mike Evans. Mike Evans, former A&M standout, but also is from that Houston area there. They got Tampa Bay with the second best odds to get him at plus 325, and Kansas City with third best odds to acquire Mike Evans at plus 450. That's a scary thought, actually. That would actually be a scary thought. Brett Veach bringing in a Mike Evans for Patrick Mahomes
over 1,000 yards in 10 straight seasons to start his career, and you get to go play with Mahomes.
I know. That'd be a hell of a way to end your career, right? To end up going ring chasing with Patrick Mahomes, a potential GOAT. Speaking of, you said you'd like for them, the Texans, to target a wide receiver in the draft. They're really drafting at a great spot where they can just take best talent available. They can draft 4, 5, 6 different positions potentially, and none of them would be a bad pick for the Texans. Benjamin Solak of The Ringer, their latest mock draft has the Texans taking Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver from LSU. At the 23rd pick. He's 6'4", 205, so that would be a nice pickup. I looked at Luke Easterling's mock draft for Sports Illustrated. He's got the Texans taking Byron Murphy at 23, saying DeMeco Ryans' first season at Houston was a massive success, and his team should only get better from here. One key area of need along the D-line is the interior D-line, where Ryan needs an explosive, disruptive playmaker who can camp out in opposing backfields. Murphy is undersized, but otherwise fits the bill perfectly. So that's Byron Murphy has been mocked, anywhere from 13 to 15. This would be a drop, actually, in Byron Murphy in the mock drafts, him falling all the way to 23 for the Texans. If he falls there, maybe the Texans make a move. Okay, here's my, since we're talking about the Texans, and by the way, there was a report from Aaron Wilson, the Texans were going to lose their safeties coach, where Aaron Wilson also reported they're going to keep their safety coach. He was going to leave. His name is Steven Adegoke. He was going to leave and go to Michigan as their DB coach, and he has decided since to stay in Houston and accept rather than accept the DB coach's job in Michigan. So remember, this is like the second time, because Rod Wright reportedly was one of the favorites for Sark. And there was a lot of talk that, Sark was zeroing in on Rod Wright and wanted that NFL pedigree. Rod Wright's got, history coaching in Texas and recruiting in Texas at UTSA and recruiting at the college level at Miami. So he seemed almost a perfect candidate, also a lifetime Longhorn coming back to Texas with that vacancy. And the reports were that Rod Wright not excited about recruiting. And that he actually wanted to hitch his wagon to the meteoric rise of one DeMeco Ryans, and DeMeco Ryans reportedly also is a big fan of Rod Wright, and Rod Wright stayed there as the assistant D-line coach. It's another one where he's deciding to stay with DeMeco Ryans and that staff instead of going to the college level, which would have been a promotion for him. Says a lot about DeMeco Ryans and the culture he has there. Coaches want to be around him. They want to stay. They think something special is building with the Texans.
Interesting. Yeah, and this offseason's big, right? Because as Ty said, they won 10 games, 7 losses, won a playoff game, but they still have holes that they have to fill if they want to really compete with the top teams in the AFC consistently.
Yep.
And that's up to Nick Caserio this offseason. But you're right, building that coaching staff, hitting the free agency, hitting the draft, and building something they can sustain long haul, because
you got the hardest part is already done.
Yeah,
CJ Stroud.
We talked about that a lot during the year, and this is why the excitement, because and you say in the draft the Texans could go any position, which is true, because when you're trying to build a foundation of an organization, you're looking for quarterback, left tackle, playmaking receiver, corner,
edge rusher.
Well, you could argue Houston already has all those.
Yeah.
I mean, they already have them in place.
They did.
They have Laramie Tunsil, who went to the Pro Bowl again this year, was one of the best tackles in the AFC, and a pretty solid offensive line. You have Nico Collins, who was the third highest graded Pro Football Focus wide receiver this year, in his third year exploding onto the scene. You have C.J. Stroud, obviously a quarterback. You have Derek Stingley at corner. You have Will Anderson, Offensive Rookie of the Year. So those are your premium positions. So now you're trying to fill holes. You're trying to get tougher up front. You're trying to, dabble into Saquon Barkley, continue to fill out your back end at safety and be better in coverage, because I think that was a problem and leaky at times. The linebacker core could use some addressing. So this could be a year where Houston kind of does like Detroit did last year, where they don't have to focus on premium positions. They need to fill some
playmakers.
Guys they know they can play.
Guys they know they can play.
Because you really have in a pretty quick order filled the elite positions you need, cornerstone players at the cornerstone positions of a franchise. Well, now you can do that kind of stuff at running back, linebacker, safety, tight end, Jatavion Sanders, some luxury players that, man, this guy's too good to pass because he can help us be a better ball club.
Speaking of being a better ball club, I have an idea because the Texans lost their offensive analyst, their offensive assistant, Shane Day, to the LA Chargers. Jim Harbaugh brought him in. He's building that coaching staff. I think the Texans may serve themselves well by bringing in Eric Bieniemy.
Ooh.
Bring in Eric Bieniemy as an assistant coach of some kind.
Interesting.
No, I mean, I haven't heard much about him being coveted on the market. A lot of us assumed that Kansas City would just make a spot for him if he didn't get picked up by some of the squad. I think he wants to go somewhere else. I don't think he wants to go back to Kansas City. I think he knows if he goes back to Kansas City, he's just going to stay in Kansas City, period. And he's never going to go anywhere else.
He's got to get outside
to explore. Yeah, he's got to get outside he's basically in the friends. He's in the coaching friend zone. All right, and the only spot where he can rise up and open mobility is Kansas City. If I'm D'Amico Ryans in Texas, I give him another opportunity and say, listen, Bobby Slowick is a star. He's a star. I mean, we can only keep him for so long. We had to up his pay this year.
He's going to be a head coach soon.
After 1 year, his first time being a play caller, we had to up his pay. We may be able to keep him around for 2 more years. But if we don't, he could step in as a potential offensive coordinator and play caller. Now that's different than the Shanahan offense, but Eric Bieniemy, I think, is skilled enough to be able to run the Shanahan offense. If you just want him to run that offense, I think everybody wants to run their scheme, whatever it may be. But even if he doesn't, necessarily take over the play calling duties or your coordinator duties, you can still bring him in as a pass game coordinator. You can still bring him in as an offensive assistant of some kind. He definitely will help your coaching staff. Now, if you don't want him to run the system that he wants to run after Bobby Slowick leaves, that's fine. You can find another alternative. But just bringing him in as a championship coach, championship caliber coach, who can bring you a lot of the cheat codes and a lot of the philosophical traits that Andy Reid covets and that Andy Reid utilizes, man, I'd bring him in. And you might have to face Kansas City. Hopefully, if all this roster construction goes according to plan and you do, and C.J. Stroud takes the next level and you do as a franchise, elevate and separate, you got to see Kansas City.
Yeah.
And that guy knows Kansas City.
Yeah, he does. I like that idea. I do. And if you're the agent for Eric Bieniemy, you're looking for a spot like that where you can get yourself back on the escalator rising, because
build your own brand.
If Bobby Slowick does have another good year and moves on, well, now you're OC and you're working with C.J. Stroud and you have an opportunity. So I like that. I like that a lot.
Good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with Ian Robbie, weekday morning 6 to 11 right here on the Horn. I do like the idea of Eric Bieniemy and trying to bring in as many different minds and intelligent people into the room and trying to figure out how to get it working, get that run game. I'm sure Eric Bieniemy could help you find more ways to get that run game working, help C.J. Stroud in his progression as a guy who worked with Patrick Mahomes. I know there is 2 camps on Eric Bieniemy. There's always been 2 camps. There's the camp of, well, he did this, but it was all Andy Reid really doing it, and it's kind of an elevated. And, we saw this year in Washington that he wasn't necessarily the guy, and even though there wasn't really a ton of talent there, but that there's that school and there's a school of thought that he is a really good offensive mind and can offer a lot. And if you're Houston and right now you're feeling pretty good that, you got your fan base coming back big, I like that. I like the thought of that as a fun move to do for Houston to keep trying to evolve and in the place that that Bobby Slowick probably has one, if you're really lucky, 2 years left as a offensive coordinator for the Texans, as he was already getting head coaching opportunities and interviews this year that very easily he could go up and take that spot because, defensive head coach, he's going to get all the credit and be able to be in the place that offense worked well. You hope that the Texans have another really good offensive year and offensive output next year. We'll see what they do in their draft to improve the offense, but I like that idea. Some good stuff from the Texans. We talked some yesterday. You can find the podcast on the podcast page at thehornfm.com or hornfm.com. You can find the podcast page, and we talked some about Texans free agents yesterday in the hour 2 of the show, and we'll get into some Cowboys free agency in a little bit. We'll come back, though. We want to come back, get to the text line, 512-447-3776 on the text line. We'll come back and get to some of those text messages. If you want to talk some Texas basketball, if you want to talk some NBA, the All-Star weekend. Any thoughts you have on that, or on the LED court that's supposed to be coming out this year for it? How you think that's going to look, and if that's going to be cool? If you feel like you got any takes on the All-Star Weekend festivities, what you like you best, send that in. And the poll of the day, who is the greatest dunker of all time? Send that in on the text line, 512-447-3776. We'll take a quick break, come back, get to the text line here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on Sports Complex on a Friday afternoon, 512 Friday, playing local music. You can go check out live around town this weekend. This is Coyote Radio. They're playing Saturday at Hole in the Wall. You did down there on campus. Check out Hole in the Wall. You can check out Coyote Radio playing Saturday at Hole in the Wall on a 512 Friday. All right, let's get to the text line. 512-447-3776. 512-447-3776, whatever you guys want to talk about on there. And we're asking a big fat poll of the day today. So I see some answers already in there. Who is the greatest dunker of all time? First text says, no silly turnovers, talking about Texas basketball. I'm assuming, and that is, yeah, I mean, that's an every game thing. And of course, when you're playing the better teams you play, the more you have to watch the turnovers. For Texas versus Houston, it's holding the ball for too long, allowing Houston to come in and bump you. And then, just instinctually, if you're a basketball player, your normal response to kind of getting trapped and bumped is to think, well, they're fouling me, because if I'm attacking and they do this to me, it's a foul. But if I'm holding the ball back, they normally won't call this. And so you think, well, they're going to call it. If I just kind of hold on to it, they'll call a foul. And they're not going to. And Houston's really good at doing that. So, not being indecisive with the basketball and pulling the ball too far out beyond the three-point line, because it just leads to too easy of fast breaks for the other team. When you pull out and you're 5 feet behind the three-point line trying to get away from pressure and they keep bringing it, and then you have to throw a pass across the court further across where if anyone tips that ball, it's going the other way for at least 2 points. Those are the type of turnovers you can't have because they lead to automatic points. If you turn the ball over on a pass underneath the basket, it usually doesn't turn out to be 2 points the other way, or at least an automatic 2. So those, if you're trying to make the big pass to Dillon Mitchell and you miss a couple of those I don't consider those as silly. The big ones you have to worry about are those ones at half court and behind the three-point line where, you're just trying to make a lazy pass across and not thinking that Houston's going to be in attack mode and just go pick that one off for an easy 2. That's more what you have to worry about with those silly turnovers against Houston. And they know better not to do it. But this is what I said earlier is I think that being able to play them earlier and see firsthand what they're going to do to you may help them a little bit coming into this game, understanding that this is not somebody you can kind of expect to not do the most of everything. They're going to come at you with everything they have every time. Going to our poll today, texter saying, let's see, Sean Kemp. Sean Kemp's going for power. For power, yes. I don't know, if you played NBA Jam, I think may give him an accelerated opinion. But yeah, Sean Kemp dunking, you never wanted to be underneath that. You never wanted to be around Sean Kemp. Let that happen on the other side of the court. You didn't want to be posterized by Sean Kemp because he came in with fury and passion. And we'll say Seattle Sean Kemp, not Cleveland Sean Kemp, when things were going downhill. And Sean Kemp in second is Dominique Wilkins. We get Nate to say it's Dominique. Dominique was great. And I mean, in-game dunking, up there, definitely top 3 undisputed in-game dunking, the human highlight reel, what he could do with the ball. I would go with this one. This texter who says, Vince Carter, greatest dunker of all time. No questions or doubts about it. Vinsanity. Yeah, I think that Vince Carter is, for me, and it may just be that I have a generational thing. Vince Carter, for me, seeing what he did in game, seeing what he did in the dunk contest, all of those, just the creativity of his dunks with the athleticism. I put it that one is, I put Vince as my top dunker of all time, but I think Dominique's their top 3. Wonder says Dominique Wilkins as well. Locksmith Ryan says, well, I think Spud Webb dunks back in the day are pretty iconic. Another vote there for Vince Carter. Another one for Vince Carter from Daydrinker 77. I like all those. Random texter number 69 says, on dunks I go old school and say Daryl Dawkins just for the shattered backboards. Is Daryl Dawkins, was he the one with the nickname that he was from Planet Sextron and all of that? Was that Daryl Dawkins, or am I mixing him up with somebody else? I can't remember off the top of my head. This is something, it's something from 10 years ago that I remember, and I can't remember off the top of my head now. But yes, he was another one like Sean Kemp that he would come down with a massive amount of force. I like how this also from Random Texter 69. Might have to deep dive to figure out if anyone would know. You might. Is there a 512 artist that has actually recorded Kansas City and happens to be performing on this weekend, bringing the two themes of this week together. I doubt recorded. I mean, your best guess. I mean, Willie Nelson, we played this week. I don't think he's playing in town this week. But Willie Nelson, if we're counting him as a 512 artist, we played him this week. Jimmy Vaughn, I know, has played it before. Maybe like a Marshall Ball, maybe W.C. Clark, but I don't think he's ever recorded it. One of those blues. I don't know if anyone young ever recorded it either. I can't say that anybody that I know is playing this weekend did. I'm sure someone could point out. I know people have played it in town, clearly. Plenty of blues players have played the song, but I don't know if anybody's recorded it. Maybe an Alan Haynes on an early thing. He plays around. I don't know, maybe. Maybe one of those guys. I don't know, though. I like the question, though. I like the way you're thinking there. Locksmith Ryan also says, has Scoot Henderson lived up to the hype this year? Haven't heard about him. He's in Portland, so you just don't hear a ton about him. He's been okay, but his shooting has not been there, so he's an okay scorer, but his shooting isn't there. It's that weird part in the middle. Like Kevin Durant earlier in his career was a really good scorer, but not necessarily the best shooter. He's improved his shooting now. Scoot Henderson has to improve his shooting. He's also had some injuries throughout the year that has kind of taken him out and lowered his playing time. And they're trying to tank, which, this is not the best year to tank. The draft's not that stocked, but I think they're trying to make sure that they don't necessarily get too good because they're still trying to go get that pick and try and figure out and rebuild that franchise. They're still trying to figure out what they're doing. But he has not lived up to the hype. He is not. Wimby has definitely been ahead of him. Chet Holmgren, who is with the class before, but he's there. He's ahead of him. And then the Thompson brothers are both doing okay, but they haven't been consistent enough to be in that conversation. Brandon Miller's actually done pretty good in Charlotte, but it's Charlotte, so no one's talking about that one either. All right, we got to take a quick break. Text line's still open, 512-447-3776. Greatest dunker of all time, send that in. If you want to talk some basketball, send that in. We'll talk a little bit more about the All-Star game. We'll talk about Texas baseball kicking off their season tonight against San Diego, and we'll get into some Cowboys talk as well, as long as and whatever else you want to talk about on the text line. 512-447-3776 is the text line. We'll come back and get to the text line and a whole lot more when we come back on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Hour 2 here on the Sports Complex, getting into some Texas baseball, kicking off their season in just a few hours, getting ready for the start of hopefully a long run all the way to Omaha and more, and getting the celebrations and all of that we're hoping Texas gets starts tonight. We'll also talk Cowboys hired some more members of their staff today. They can start working on some other decisions. We've heard that they said they need to get hired. They need to fill out their staff before they can move forward. They've hired some more. We'll talk about those and some possible free agent decisions that the Cowboys are going to have to make. We'll also talk some Texas basketball earlier in the show. We talked some NBA All-Star Weekend earlier in the show. We were asking you who is the greatest dunker of all time on that list. We have a couple good names. Sean Kemp has come up a bunch. Dominique Wilkins has come up a number of times. Vince Carter, who just announced a few minutes ago, is a finalist for the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. That will be, they just announced the finalist. Chauncey Billups, also a name up as a finalist for the Hall of Fame coming up for basketball. It is basketball. A lot more people get in. I'm more of a fan of that. I get that it's not, I get people want to say, well, it's a Hall of Fame means a Hall of Fame. I think we all know, like that. I don't like leaving it in the hands of a group of like 50 people that they get to decide the fate of who we think of as the greatest, because they mess it up constantly. So I don't trust that system. I say put everybody in a Hall of Fame that was great, and then we can go through the Hall of Fame and go, oh, that guy's better than that. Of course that guy's better. I don't necessarily need the super mega, we have the most elite Hall of Fame ever, because there's, in the Baseball Hall of Fame, there's a lot of players who don't deserve to be in it anymore. And they're never going to come out. And there's people that got in because they played for the Yankees or the Dodgers and everybody loved them, but they weren't the best players. They just played for big teams. And smaller market guys don't get in because they didn't get the love and because back in the day it was harder to watch them. You know, it's like Nolan Ryan never won a Cy Young, and you want to tell me these guys are picking the Hall of Fame? And in football, it's great that you have it, but that you're a bit more exclusive. That's fine, but Darren Woodson's not in, and he should be, but he's not because he's getting excluded because they already put in too many Cowboys, and that's just silly. So I get the basketball is probably too far the other way, that almost everybody gets in. Like Vince Carter is not a Hall of Famer in any other sport than basketball, but he'll be a Hall of Famer in basketball. So I get it, maybe a little too far, but I'm more for that when you're trying to teach the history of your game. And you're trying to teach people to fall in love with the old game and watch old film and watch, the history of it and learn how to play and learn to pick people from different people's games. And appreciating the history of the game. I appreciate that more than, only watch this team and only watch these 5 guys. This is what was great. This is because it was my childhood. I like these guys, and no one else is, and no one should get in from the 90s in baseball because they were cheating, and they cheated before and they've cheated since. But we know they took steroids. So and it was the most fun time anybody had watching baseball, but we're taking that away. I don't like putting it in the hands of such a small group of people to be so, inclusive. I prefer the NBA version. I know I'm very much in the minority on that one. But I think if you're trying to say, if I'm going to the Hall of Fame and I don't want to talk about who's not there. I want to talk about who is there. I prefer that. I prefer to see more people in than less, because I'm more of a let's go see the game and see the greatest plays and the greatest players, and not, well, they were great, but they weren't great enough. Just my opinion. Just riles me up. So Vince Carter's, probably going to get in. Chauncey Billups will probably get in, which he wouldn't get in on any other Hall of Fame. It is what it is. It is what it is. Text line still open, 512-447-3776. Who is the greatest dunker of all time? Keep sending those in if you want to talk basketball or you want to talk some football. We can go there. Also, we told you, Texas baseball does start tonight, 7 o'clock, Longhorn Network. You can check that out. Number 16 is where Texas starts in the poll, going against the San Diego team. That is it's from the WCC, the Western Coast Conference. They're not a powerhouse team. They do have some players on there that are decent. They're predicted to finish number 2 in the Western Conference, Western Coast Conference. So they're not a pushover team. There's somebody that's going to go after you early, and in baseball, you let a couple runs go, anything can happen. LeBaron Johnson Jr., going to be the ace for the Longhorns this season, gets the start tonight. They're still going to be trying to figure out that rotation, figure out the arms, how they're doing right now for Texas. They are lucky. They have a lot of talent on this team. We'll be able to cover it more and more as the season goes on, and we see who's performing at a high level and what the Texas is doing. But a good start, a 3-game series this weekend against San Diego in I believe all games are on Longhorn Network. So we'll get the last big run of Longhorn Network before we lose it when Texas gets to the SEC. Let's talk a little NFL real quick. We'll do this. We'll go back to text line. We'll go back to the NFL. How about that? The NFL, the Cowboys did hire a couple of defensive coaches. They are trying to fill out that Mike Zimmer staff after they lost some guys to the Commanders, and Dirty went to the Seahawks. They have now hired a defensive line coach, Jeff Zagonina is how I believe it's pronounced. The defensive line coach, he's coached before at San Francisco. He was with Washington last. He comes in highly recommended as a defensive line coach. Your assistant D-line coach is actually a former Cowboy, Greg Ellis. If you remember, Greg Ellis played for the Cowboys from 1998 to 2008. He started his coaching career kind of oddly. He was not necessarily an assistant coach a lot of places. He started as a head coach of Texas College, a small school, then went to SAGU, was a head coach at both of those, and then I think realized that he wanted to go and take on bigger things, gets the opportunity from Jerry Jones and Mike Zimmer to come back and be a part of this Dallas Cowboys coaching staff as the assistant D-line coach, see how he fits into that world. Interesting hire. I like bringing in an ex-player that can kind of show a different look, especially in a Mike Zimmer run team where we know Mike Zimmer is not necessarily going to be as player-friendly as Dan Quinn was. There's reports that some people thought Dan Quinn was too nice and too giving to his players, that it took away some, that players were able to kind of take advantage of him at points. That's reports. We don't know, you can form your own conclusions on those types of things. But those are some of the reports, is that Dan Quinn may have been a little bit too nice to some of the players, and Mike Zimmer is not known to be that guy. He's known to be fair and a really good coach, but not necessarily as much as the player coach Dan Quinn was. So you bring in a Greg Ellis, who could be more of a player coach, understands how to talk to the players pretty well, be a piece of that, building that D-line. And, with Micah Parsons, that's somebody where you're going to be talking. He's kind of in the D-line meetings more than linebackers. We'll see what Mike Zimmer does with him. That's one of the big questions with his free agency looming, is that how does Mike Zimmer and Micah Parsons' relationship goes? But we'll hopefully see Greg Ellis be a big part of connecting that gap between the two. They also have hired the defensive run scheme or defensive run game coach, which was a big hole for the Cowboys last season, stopping the run. They had brought in a coach to do that, Paul Guenther, was actually with Mike Zimmer in Cincinnati for about 4 years. When Mike Zimmer went on to take the Minnesota head coaching job, Guenther took over as a DC in Cincinnati, so he has a long relationship with him. The thought is that he's going to be brought in right now with Mike Zimmer, and depending on how the staff goes going forward, he may move up in the staff there as well, and is somebody that if Mike Zimmer does decide at some point that he's done coaching, that Paul Guenther is a guy he trusts to take over for him and build that same type of defense. So a person that a lot of people like, he does have defensive coordinator experience. So somebody with a lot of experience at a high level of defensive coaching is a good thing to see, to bring in when you're hiring these coaches, and puts him on probably the biggest hole that Dallas's defense had last season, which was allowing running. A big piece to try and fill that hole and get it done to get Dallas to be able to defend that run a little bit better, figure out the players they may need to target in free agency and target in the draft, work with Mazi Smith along with the defensive line coach and assistant D-line coach they hired. All those guys are going to be part of trying to make sure that first-round pick you used last year on Mazi Smith is going to turn into something positive for you. That wasn't necessarily the case last season in his rookie season. Can you make something more out of that? They're going to be spending some effort on that. And I think in the run game, he'll be using him too. And again, another guy, we'll see his relationship with Micah Parsons in the run defense. Does he try to get him more involved in that run defense? Different ways to look at that. All right, let's get back to the text line. We'll get back to some Cowboys talk. 512-447-3776. Let's see. Texter says, not to take anything away from Kansas City's Super Bowl win, and I'm glad they did, but how much of them getting there was influenced by Taylor Swift and the increase in ratings she brings, especially after Baltimore's debacle? Always follow the money. None. 0%. 0% was that. I don't think the NFL was rigging games to let Kansas City go win another one. I don't think it was an elaborate plan. I don't think any of that. I think that Kansas City's really good in the playoffs because they won a Super Bowl last year without Taylor Swift. I don't think that now they got in and got the free pass and they said, well, the Cowboys are too good. We can't let them in because that'll stop Taylor Swift. They'll beat him in the playoffs. We know that. We have to let Jordan Love beat him. I don't think anything was set up that way. I think Baltimore didn't run the football and they lost. They didn't run the football. And then San Francisco in the second half didn't run the football. And you had to understand that Kansas City, as good as that defense was, their secondary defense was always going to be better than their run game defense. And the run game defense was pretty good in the playoffs. But they didn't keep running the ball. And you have to keep running the ball against this team. And everybody stopped doing it when they had initial success. When Kansas City had initial success against the run, they said, screw it, we'll just start throwing it. And it didn't end well for anybody. They got off the field too much, gave Patrick Mahomes too much time, and you can't give Patrick Mahomes too much time. So, none. I'm not a conspiracy guy on that. I don't think any of it's fixed. I don't think any of it's done in point shaving or any of that other stuff. I know it's a popular opinion now because it's easier than facing the truth that it just ends up that certain people are winners and certain people aren't. I know that's a harder thing to swallow than this massive conspiracy where everybody's going around to screw you personally and help out the Kansas City Chiefs and screw Kyle Shanahan for some reason that they hate San Francisco, which is a bigger city, and they keep helping a smaller market city win. Even though I know it's Taylor Swift, it's still a smaller market city. And somehow all of the owners who own the league are all okay with it because, we'll get the Taylor Swift money, which they don't really get the money. Vegas got the money. So there was some, a little bit more of the run, but you also know that will probably go down next season, so it's not a great long-term plan. The conspiracy doesn't take a lot of grant. And the reality is any NFL conspiracy that doesn't equate for the fact that there's 30 billionaires who don't like each other and they would all have to agree to let someone else win. That's why I don't think the conspiracies hold water. Because I don't think Jerry Jones is walking in there and go, oh, Taylor Swift's going to watch the Kansas City Chiefs? Yeah, we'll lose. We'll lose to the Packers. That's fine. And if they're not the ones making those decisions and it's just Roger Goodell making those decisions, that seems crazy to me too because he works for the owners. The NFL is owned by the owners. So they have to make the decision that they're all going to lose, and I just don't see that happening. So, no, I don't see that. Let's go. All right, we'll go ahead. Nate says, people forget. He also says, greatest dunker, LeBron's mom for dunking on Delonte West. You can't make fun of people that, have mental health issues like Delonte West. That's very rude, Nate. I hope for the best for Delonte West. I haven't heard anything. I know Mark Cuban tried to help him out a few years ago, but I don't know if that's stuck or not. People forget about the really, really good players. We love them. They don't get into a Hall of Fame. And they like Darren Woodson doesn't get the credit he should. And I know that's the name just because that's the one that's most recent. But there's been great players before. And, you see why players, when they get in the Hall of Fame, why it's so important to them. Because they know it's, people have kids to have a legacy. And they don't do a great job with them all the time. But that people want to have a legacy. And when you talk about, well, you're in the Hall of Fame, you got to that point. You can share your legacy. And now you can share your message to raise more money for charity and raise more money, raise more awareness for the game. I just prefer that to trying to hold people out because of writers don't think they deserve in. And look, I'm a media person. I get it. But I don't think I should be deciding whether or not somebody who is much more talented than I did and sacrifice more for the game should be in or out of the league. I'm not saying I'm the one who should have final say of that one either. I think if you go, no, they're really good, but I'd vote a lot more guys in than other people do. I'll tell you that much. Text says that Super Bowl game came down to just a couple plays that did not go San Francisco's way. That's it. Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about they figured out how to move to muff a punt, and the guy missed that he shouldn't have gotten out of the way, and that all those things that happen. It just doesn't equal out the way. Casey was called for the most holding calls throughout the year, but didn't get called for any in the Super Bowl. No one gets called for holds in the Super Bowl. Historically, they've gone through and done the records. There's very few holds called in the Super Bowl. There just aren't. They just don't call them very often. People hate them. They're questionable calls. They usually let them go. They don't want quarterbacks to get hurt in the Super Bowl either. There's a number of reasons, but just historically, if you go through it, this could be a problem every year
we just live in an era now where people can go online and point out very simple things and go, well, this is a conspiracy now. And it's not. It's always been that way. There's never been that many holds called in the Super Bowl. There's a couple articles that came out about it recently. If you want to go find them, maybe I'll try and find one. But there's been a couple articles about that where they're like, it's not an anomaly that Kansas City wasn't called for holds. It's because they just don't call them in the Super Bowl. And players know that, and so they hold a bit more in the Super Bowl. And sure, they held San Francisco, and San Francisco held Kansas City. It's what it is in football. They want to protect the quarterback. They don't want the worst thing in the world for the NFL and every owner is you put two quarterbacks and Brock Purdy and Patrick Mahomes go down in the Super Bowl and everybody goes, crap, what a crappy league. That's what they don't want. So if you're saying they fixed it to not get their quarterbacks injured, yes, they make rules to make sure their quarterbacks are not injured. They do that. I want to give you this real quick. We'll go through this and we may talk about it again another day because we'll run on time on this one. But I have 5 free agents. We talked about 5 free agents for the long runs. Keep the text coming, by the way. 512-447-3776. 5 free agents for the Texans yesterday that are going to be free agent decisions that they have to make. 5 free agents for the Cowboys. We'll go through those. There's a big difference between the Texans and the Cowboys free agents, though. The Texans free agency, they have $56 million to spend, so they're going to pick a little bit more of who they want to bring back and who they can, where they can find the money and all that. The Cowboys are over the cap until they, re-sign a couple players and, renegotiate some contracts. They're trying to cut cap. So they don't necessarily have the room to sign a lot of these guys, but they want to bring in more talent. Jerry says he's going all in again as well. So you have to see those. So let's start off with the cornerback position and Stephon Gilmore, because it's not just Stephon Gilmore in this decision, but we'll start with him. Stephon Gilmore, his last contract was 2 for $20. He's 33 years old. You don't figure he's going to get 2 for $20 again. He's also coming off a shoulder injury. He's going to be dealing with shoulder rehab. He's a pretty good player, but you have to figure out where you're going to go with your cornerback position with Mike Zimmer. I think Stephon Gilmore, he's talked highly about him before in the past. He's ranked by PFF. That's the number we're going to look at for free agency grades. He's the 5th highest rate free agent for cornerbacks in the NFL free agency this offseason. But they do have a couple of options. DaRon Bland was in the nickel, came up, played alongside Gilmore when Trayvon Diggs went down. Trayvon Diggs coming back. Do you just move DaRon Bland in that number 2, and you don't want to pay for Stephon Gilmore to be at number 3? His number's not going to be there. They're figuring he could make around $7 or $8 million this year on a 2 or 3 year deal. So if you say he gets a 2-year deal around $14 million, $15 million, that may be a little more than they want to spend on the quarterback when they can go out and have Jordan Lewis, who's also a free agent, didn't have his, had a better year this year when he got put in the nickel, and you play with Trayvon Diggs on one side, Bland on the other, and Jordan Lewis there in the nickel. He's a free agent too. His number seems a little bit lower. Now, he's somebody that may be trying to get poached by Dan Quinn. We know he's somebody the Lions are looking at as well as they're trying to build up their secondary. Gilmore will be that too, but Jordan Lewis is somebody a little lower on the radar that the Cowboys might be able to get for cheaper, might be able to get for a 3-year, 3-year $10 million or something like that, where it's a little bit easier to get him. That's something they could look at in the free agency. I wouldn't expect they keep Gilmore and Jordan Lewis, so one of them is probably gone. And as much as you like to keep Gilmore, unless he gives that hometown discount, it seems unlikely they bring him back. They keep DaRon Bland. Now, I've also said I'm open to trading DaRon Bland if I'm a Cowboy, just because I know his value could be as high as it'll ever be. And if I get a first for him, I think that might be value if you're not going to be able to keep him in 2 years to go for that. Or a first and a player or something like that, I'd look into it. But if I'm keeping DaRon Bland and Trayvon Diggs, you may have to go the cheaper route with Jordan Lewis instead of Stephon Gilmore. We also look at the left tackle position, Tyron Lewis. He's ranked 34 years old, still ranked in the PFF offensive tackle free agent rankings as the first best available. We know the Chiefs have interest because they feel they can get him. Now, this is the question. Will he again do what he did on his last contract? And he has not played a full season since 2015. Cowboys knew that. His last contract, they gave him an incentive-based contract. They gave him a contract that said, look, if you play this many games, we'll pay you more money. But we don't think you are. We're going to bet against that you're going to play all these games. And that's what they end up doing with an incentive-based contract. If he's not, he's probably going to make around $13 to $15 million a year. Could be too much for the Cowboys to reach for. They got Tyler Smith. They feel could be their left tackle of the future. They could try to make some other decisions there. We know he's going to take value on the road. If he gives him that incentive-based contract with a low salary cap number, that'll be a lot more likely that the Cowboys try to go for that, especially in a one-year deal. He may ask for 2. If he gets a one-year deal, I could see him coming back. Without that 1-year, 2-year deal, probably not going to come back there either. And that leads you to Tyler Biadasz at the center position. 5th best free agent center according to PFF. But he's 26 years old. He's been on that great contract. He's a 4th-round pick. He's overperformed for the 4th-round pick selection that he was. He's been a good He's been a good center. He went to the Pro Bowl one year, a couple years ago. He's been doing pretty well at the center position, but not an all-pro, not the best. So where do you feel he's going to end up if you're going to give him that 3 or 4 year deal to try and get the best number out of him and get that lowest salary cap number this year? When you're talking about, if you're looking at a center like that, possibly getting $9 to $10 million a season in that range, that could be difficult for the Cowboys unless they extend him longer. So they may have to ask the question, do we want to go longer term, a 3-4 year deal with Tyler Biadasz so we can lock him up? And also we know that we have, a little bit more room to play with this season because we're going to put the money further back on the back end of it, and we'll get to that point when we get there. I think that that's somebody you could re-sign. You're going to have to bring him back and take a risk that he continues to improve. But at 26, a decent possibility. So if you're going to let Gilmore go, bring back Lewis, let go Tyron Smith, stick with Tyler Smith. Tyler Biadasz may be that piece where you have to make that decision and go with him. Otherwise, you're going to have to go out in free agency and try and get a better center than him. And without the money to really bid against people might be a bit of an issue. Then we can go down to Jayron Kearse, 30-year-old safety. Didn't have his best year. His number is going to go down. This may be somebody you can bring back for cheap unless Dan Quinn really is a fan of him. He allowed 34 catches on 41 targets this year. This was not his best year. Mike Zimmer likes what he sees. You may be able to get him for a little bit cheaper, 2 years, $6 million. If Mike Zimmer is a fan, interesting free agent to bring back because this is one where, especially on a 1-year deal, could definitely want to come back for the Cowboys to prove that he does have the value at 30 to get another deal at 31. They may be able to get him on a cheap 1-year deal. And then finally, we'll say Tony Pollard. We know that's the elephant in the room. 26 years old, was franchise tagged for $11 million last year. Did not perform like that, coming off the big surgery in the leg injury and the broken leg. He's ranked as the 4th best free agent running back. If you're the Cowboys, you need 2 running backs, but you can't pay top price for a guy who doesn't seem to be able to be the bell cow back. He was looking better at the end, but never good enough to be the guy. So unless he's willing to take a big pay dump, which I don't think he is, I think he'd rather go somewhere else and prove himself. I think there's another guy you might have to let walk for the Cowboys. And so it's a different position. We know that Jerry Jones loves his guys. We know that Jerry Jones wants to keep Dallas Cowboys and wants to have Cowboys for life. There's a lot of free agents that he may have to let walk this year just to try and make the salary cap work and go out there and really try to go all in. Try and bring in some other running back help. Draft some other help on the offensive line instead of continuing to re-sign the guys that he knows he likes. Unless they give those team-friendly deals, I'm normally against not paying guys. But I think for Jerry, there's 5 free agents there, and you may not be able to pay them all. I think you should bring back Gilmore if he gives you the right deal. But if not, Jordan Lewis is a decent option. He did okay for you at the end of last season. I'd bring him back. I'd bring back Tyler Biadasz. And everybody else, unless Jayron Kearse says, I want another 1-year prove-it deal to show I can be better than I was last year, that's out of my top 5. That's who I'm going with. What do you guys think? Let me know on the text line, 512-447-3776. If you have somebody you think the Cowboys need to bring back, need to get rid of, who they need to go after in free agency, send that stuff in on the text line, 512-447-3776. You want to talk Texas basketball, All-Star Weekend, who is the greatest dunker of all time, the poll of the day, send all those in on the text line. We'll come back. We'll go behind the burnt orange curtain with Rob Babers. We come back here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex on a 512 Friday, playing your local artists you can go check out around town live this weekend. This is Ray Prim. Going to be playing tomorrow night at the 04 Center with Eric and Michelle, two really good artists you can go check out tomorrow night at the 04 Center, a cool venue. Ray Prim, super talented guy. Always fun to go check out. Ray Prim does an awesome job if you want to go check out a really cool show. Tomorrow night at the 04 Center, if you're not watching All-Star Weekend, you are done with football season, you say it's time to go enjoy life, go check out Ray Prim and Erica Michelle at the 04 Center tomorrow night. Will be a ton of fun out there, I'm sure. To get back to a texter who said about the holding penalties, I found a tweet about it. It's not the one I was looking at, but it does say there's been 7 holding penalties called in the last 6 Super Bowls, 7 total offensive holding penalties called in the last 6 Super Bowls. So you're averaging just over 1 Super Bowl. There's just not that many called. They're trying to protect quarterbacks. The guys who get to the Super Bowl don't get called for as many. And I know the Chiefs got called for a ton early in the season. You also have to remember early Chiefs and later Chiefs are 2 different teams this season. But just a note that's one of those ones for the conspiracy. They just were trying to swallow their whistles a lot for the holding penalties. They do that a lot. Text line's open, 512-447-3776. Dexter says, do you think Zimmer will be as enthusiastic with Overshawn as Quinn was? I mean, not for the same reasons, but I assume yes. I think that he will love, and I think that everyone in the Cowboys will love getting another linebacker back into that system. With all the injuries and everything they've had, I think they're going to love being able to get a linebacker for Mike Zimmer. He's going to enjoy everything that Overshawn can do. I don't know if he's going to use him as a blitzer as much, but we'll see. But I think that he's looking forward to it, and I think Overshawn is probably jumping to get back on the field and go play. Ramtex69 says, I'm not even a fan of Casey or Swift necessarily, but she just donated $100,000 to the family of someone killed at the post-parade shooting. Does someone out there think that she or the NFL owners were in on that somehow too? No. Come on now. It's frustrating, but on Sunday they were just better. When it mattered the most, every game ends handing 50% of fans a loss unless it ends in a tie, and then everyone sucks for everyone. Yeah, no, I get that, and that's what I'm saying. I get that it's a fun thing to look at conspiracies, and man, I enjoyed smoking weed when I was younger too, but I'm over it now, and I don't like necessarily trying to ruin everything that I love by saying that everything is fixed and there's no chance to win and all that. Why would I watch sports? If I believe that they were truly fixed, why would I watch? Because it doesn't make any sense. And I've watched enough, and I watched tons and tons to firmly believe it, and know people involved in it, have talked to people involved in it, and that it's not. And I know people will believe that there's still point shaving and everything else because some people are going to always be a victim, and there's no way that they just messed up and miss free throws or whatever else. It's, it is what it is. But no, I won't play that. That's why I'll read that text and it'll tell you no. No, I do not think it had anything to do with it. Let's play this sound. Hook 'em up behind. Rod Babers went behind the burnt orange curtain as he does every day on Hook 'em Up with their Ian Rod B. Some good stuff today on the show. Give you a little of that on a Hook 'em Up replay here on the Sports Complex.
All right, let's talk a couple of items here, Texas football related. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Apparently, the coaching carousel in the NFL has affected the Texas Longhorns once again. Less than 4 weeks after it was revealed that William Gay, the former NFL cornerback, mostly with the Pittsburgh Steelers, was going to join the Texas staff as a defensive analyst. That is not going to be the case, because the Washington Commanders announced he's going to be an assistant defensive backs coach for Dan Quinn. So I believe that means there's an analyst spot open for Sark. So I'm assuming they're going to either promote somebody to their defensive analyst role, or maybe they'll go to the NFL once again and go look for another defensive analyst. Remember, William Gay was drafted by the Steelers, had been with the Steelers for almost a decade, off and on. Actually had two separate stints with the Steelers. His initial stint, and then he actually went to the Cardinals, I think, for a while, then came back to the Steelers. I was really excited about this because he had worked with some of the best defensive minds in all of football. Had worked with Dick LeBeau for a while. Dick LeBeau is a Hall of Fame coordinator in the NFL as a defensive mind. He also had worked with Mike Tomlin, of course. Mike Tomlin's the head coach, but Mike Tomlin famously was a defensive back coach, my defensive back coach in Tampa. So I thought he was actually going to bring a lot of wisdom, experience, possible solutions, problem-solving aspects to that Texas defense as an analyst. That will not happen because William Gay is staying in the NFL. So Texas has to find another defensive analyst.
I nominate Rod Babers.
I would love to do it. I'd love to do it. Hey, you know what? And hey, if I get a call, I'm all for it. I mean, they might post a position too, but I don't know what they're going to do with that position. That's going to be interesting. Okay, so the other news here: Steve Bam Bam McMichael hospitalized yesterday. Just throwing that out there. He, I believe, they said he has pneumonia. I believe he was diagnosed with pneumonia. So they're going to be monitoring him, obviously, giving his health and how fragile it is. Almost any change can be considered, negative. So they're monitoring him right now, and I believe he had to be in the hospital for them to do that. So for everybody who was wondering about Steve McMichael, and I actually got a chance to see his wife at the Super Bowl because of they were celebrating the Hall of Fame class. So she was great. She was in there and she was there in great spirits as well. But so Steve Bam Bam McMichael, legendary lifetime Longhorn, in the hospital right now dealing with pneumonia. Here's Bucky Brooks did a really good write-up for NFL.com. Bucky Brooks does a great job studying the draft, breaking down the draft, and he had his top 5 NFL draft prospects by position, and he ranked. And I was actually surprised how many Longhorns end up making his list, and I shouldn't be because a lot of Longhorns are getting drafted. He's got Jay Brooks as his top running back on the board.
That's almost unanimous.
It is unanimous. I haven't seen any other draft analyst with another running back ahead of him. So Johnny Brooks, top running back on the board. He's followed by Trey Benson, Blake Corum, Bucky Irving, I think was his 4th running back he's got there. Quarterbacks, of course, I mean, just for the sake of discussion, he got Caleb Williams. He's got Jaden Daniels, though, ahead of Drake May. Remember I told you guys, you'll get more and more draft analysts who are going to put Jaden Daniels ahead of Drake May. It is not a guarantee that Drake May is going to be the second quarterback taken. There are a lot of people that actually like Jaden Daniels ahead of him. And you know whose name is starting to skyrocket up at draft boards, at least in the mock draft world? J.J. McCarthy. People are starting to say that I guess Jim Harbaugh's offense gave us maybe they gave us the misperception that he was a game managing quarterback and didn't have high level traits, physical traits at quarterback. But there are a lot of scouts now that are saying that J.J. McCarthy is a fast riser and his draft stock is increasing. He's got him 5th. He's got him behind Penix and Drake May.
It's interesting because I remember watching in his junior year, whatever the year, not this past year, but the year before, watching J.J. McCarthy and thinking, you know what, he's got some, Joe Burrow to his game. The way he can escape, the way he can not just escape, but buy time, keep plays alive. And then, of course, they got to the national championship game last year, and he threw the 2 pick-sixes against TCU. Had a bad game there, and TCU had him booked, had him read pretty quick. And you wonder, coming into this year with Jim Harbaugh, knowing how talented they were, they really pared back the offense and just said, you know what, we can win this with our defense
just
and our running
game.
Yeah, we're gonna look at the schedule we got. We can beat most teams with our depth, our defense, our offensive and defensive line. Let's just not make mistakes. And you wonder because he looked more dynamic as a junior as he did or as a sophomore than he did last year.
Okay, yeah, no, I agree with you on that because like I said, I think based on the film this year, people thought he was a game manager.
Yeah, well, that's probably what they made him.
Yeah, and it's like, well, if Jim Harbaugh's got you managing the game, why the hell we draft you really high as a high-level quarterback to be a franchise guy? So that's a really good point, though, because I do remember you saying that last year. And I remember it stood, I was like, oh, really?
Well, I also, remember in his introductory news conference, Jim Harbaugh made the prediction that he'd be the first quarterback drafted. He'd be 1-1.
Yeah, he said he'd be the first.
He said when it's all said and done, you guys are going to be taking him 1-1. But that's a coach, supporting his player, but indicating he thinks he'll get drafted higher than people are thinking. And to your point right here.
Right now, he's rising up draft boards. He really is. Wide receiver, no Longhorn cracked his top 5. His top 5, Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, Keon Coleman, and he's got Brian Thomas Jr., so he's got 2 LSU receivers in that top 5. Only Rome Odunze and Keon Coleman and Marvin Harrison Jr. Everybody's got Marvin Harrison Jr. actually at the top of their board. Tight ends, though, he's got J.T. Sanders, the number 2 tight end, which also I think is pretty universal. Brock Bowers is the number 1 tight end. He's got J.T. Sanders, number 2, followed by Cade Stover from Ohio State, Theo Johnson from Penn State, and A.J. Barner from Michigan. Yeah, Michigan's all over this damn thing. He's got Michigan's guys are everywhere. The other Longhorns that are represented, of course, on the interior D-line, he's got the D tackles. He's got actually Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat 2nd and 3rd. He's got the Illinois defensive tackle, Jerzon Newton. He's got him number 1 overall. Then Michigan's Chris Jenkins is number 4. Then Missouri's Darius Robinson, the number 5 D tackle on Bucky Brooks's big board. And that's about it actually for the Longhorns that are represented here. But you got 4. He's made his top 5 at every position. You got 4 Longhorns represented at top 5 at their position. Nobody higher than Jonathan Brooks, who's considered the top running back on the board. So there you go. I mean, it looks like you're going to have a lot of representation. And the way this is slotted, I think it'll end up, like I said, being that second round where you're going to have 4 to 5 Longhorns drafted in that second round. That's going to be real, real big. That's going to be huge. I think that'll be – I don't know if there's been a second round where Texas had that – any round, actually, where Texas had that many players drafted in a particular round. So I think that's the round to watch. After Byron Murphy, you have a lot of folks that end up in that second round. It maybe even A.D. Mitchell. He could sneak into the first round. We talked about that. When Mel Kiper was asked what of the wide receivers, which is the deepest position in this draft, which wide receiver do you think is underrated, underappreciated the most? He said the Texas guys. He said the Texas guys, and he meant A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy being kind of underappreciated and underrated wide receivers coming out in this class. All right, next time we go behind the Burners curtain, we'll get into what a lot of college football fans are excited about right now, which is the reveal of the trailer for the EA Sports College Football 2025 video game. So a lot of college football fans are excited about this, mostly trying to figure out where their best players on their team, how highly rated they're going to be, and what their overall rating will be. Will you have a 99 on this game? What will be Quinn Ewers' rating? We'll talk about that a little bit. Quinn Ewers should be the highest rated Longhorn on the video game.
Well, let me ask you this, and Ty can weigh in. When the video game comes out, because I've not played this game, when the video game comes out, will it be for last year or will it be for this year?
It'll be for the upcoming year.
Yeah.
Now you can play like legacy stuff, and so I believe it lets you go back sometimes. And
so it'll be for the upcoming season.
Yeah, and you can, and I think Ty may know this better than me. You can build like last year's roster if you want to play with that team. You can always kind of just build a roster and get stuff going yourself. Yeah,
that's very tedious.
It is tedious, but I know a lot of people that
you could do
a lot of people do that.
But
no,
yeah, the rosters will be like is usually before. It was semi-accurate, and that's why they got in trouble because they weren't giving players any money. And the names weren't in it. This year, the names will be like the actual player names will be in the game. Before it would be Vince Young number 10, and it'd be 6'5", 220-pound quarterback with 97 speed, and so it's gonna be very cool to have actual like player faces and stuff like that. That's gonna be brand new. I'm very excited for this game.
Very cool. Okay, and we'll talk about that. We'll take your thoughts on who will be the highest rated Longhorns because they rate them from 99 as the highest down, right?
It'll be Quinn, but nobody should get a 99. That's the whole thing. You can't just be giving out 99s. 99 means you're an all-time great. 99 means you're like a goat.
Or Patrick Mahomes.
You got to be at the Heisman finalist. Me get 99. So I hope they don't just frivolously just throw out really high scores to folks. I hope they actually are really smart about it because
would it be Quinn or Kelvin Banks is the highest rated Longhorn?
That's a good question.
It's going to be Quinn.
It's going to be Quinn. Yeah, they'll do it just because it's a quarterback thing. It'll be Quinn overall. But Kelvin Banks will probably be the second highest rated Longhorn.
In the last game, Johnny Manziel, I think, was one of the only 99s, and he was unstoppable.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of the whole point of a 99.
Robert Griffin the year before that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. You can only give out like 2 or 3 of them a college football season.
And think about this. Since the last one came out in 2013, they couldn't do like roster updates back then. So now weekly, it's going to be like Madden where they'll like tweak. If somebody breaks out or something, they won't just remain whatever overall they would start at the year at. They'll change it every week, which is I think is going to make the game a lot better.
Yeah,
all right, there we go. That was that trailer became
it blew up.
It blew up like crazy yesterday.
Cannot wait for that game to come out. All right, we'll take our last break. We'll come back and wrap it up here on the Sports Complex on the Horn, 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. All right, we got to wrap things up. My man chances on winning tomorrow's game against Houston, 25%. Maybe that's generous, 25%. I wish I could say it was better. I hope it's better. I hope we come out and beat them, but I'd say 25% is what I'll give them right now. I do love, if you like betting, the All-Star Game bets. The Western Conference 2.5-point favorites. Over under 364.5. That's a lot of points expected in the All-Star Game. And for anybody who follows celebrity dating, CJ Stroud was seen leaving a charity softball game with Amber Rose. She has said, "We don't know each other. He was just nice enough to give me a ride back to the hotel." So, crisis averted, Houston Texans fans. CJ Stroud's not entering that world. All right, we're going to get out of here. We'll be back on Monday to break it all down, all the action on the weekend, and hopefully, Texas Longhorns win and a big weekend in baseball. Till then, be kind, be safe, keep your underwear clean, and we'll see you right back here